All right, so earlier this year, SRAM introduced Eagle Transmission, their hangerless drivetrain built around their Universal Derailleur Hanger dropout. It's a slick design that got a lot of press over the last few months. Some liked the tech, but not so much the price tag. As with most of SRAM's drivetrains, the trickle-down was inevitable, and today it's here with the GX Eagle transmission. And in this video, I'm gonna share my thoughts on the prices, weights, and shifting performance. And no, I'm not gonna step on it or kick on it. Let's get into it. Before we jump into it, I just want to take a quick moment and mention that this video is partially supported by Salsa Cycles. Are you or do you know someone just getting into mountain biking? The Salsa Rangefinder is an excellent entry-level bike. The geometry is deliberately not XC race, but trail riding inspired, which instills confidence and is simply more fun. It's available in 29er or 27.5 plus wheel sizes and has the most accessible pricing in Salsa's mountain bike range. Check out the link right here, or you can also find a link in the description below. All right, so I'll be the first to admit, I get really hyped up with new technology. But yes, we often see tech that's a bit silly, like an iPhone every year. I mean, come on. But when SRAM launched the Eagle transmission by using their UDH standard and replacing that hanger with nothing, this was a big deal and it excited me. So to rewind a little bit, SRAM introduced their XXSL, XX, and XO Eagle transmission systems in March. And I did a whole video on that, which is linked in the description below. It's a hangerless interface with the derailleur mounting directly to the rear wheel axle. Because of this, it has a very special install process that essentially replaces the adjustment points on the derailleur itself. SRAM claims that by removing the derailleur hanger, the cassette and derailleur work better together, creating a more precise shifting experience. And long story short, I have to agree, but more on this soon. All right, so let's start by diving into some differences and weights. First, SRAM changed things up when they added the XXSL to the mix, complicating their lineup a bit. But the GX group remains an affordable, no-frills group, but it shares many similarities with the XO Eagle transmission group that was just launched. The shifting pod is the same and comes in at 70 grams with the Matchmaker clamp. The cranks are also aluminum. However, the GX cranks don't come with that fancy cutout that the XO aluminum version has, and it comes in at a heavier 734 grams, 111 grams more than the XO crank. However, the GX cranks, as you see here, come with these composite bash guards, adding extra weight. It should also be noted that the crank has a wider spindle, all of the cranks from the transmission system, which is designed around a 55mm chain line. So this also requires different dub bottom bracket spacers compared to the previous GX Eagle Access, or really any Eagle system. A 3mm spacer is required on the non-drive side, and a 7.5mm spacer was required on the drive side. This was a kind of confusing bit of the installation process for me, as the kit did not come with a bottom bracket or spacers. So while I tested the 170mm cranks, the GX cranks are available in 165 and 175mm options and come with the new 8-bolt direct mount T-type chainring. So the derailleur is also similar to the other 3 Eagle transmission offerings. However, you may notice the battery location rotated 90 degrees clockwise, and it is now tucked in the middle of the derailleur. SRAM mentions that this change is to protect itself from the impacts better, making for a more striking appearance. So I'm not sure if this was a patent thing or just trying to make the GX just a more robust derailleur, but it's definitely different from the other 3. And I do actually like the look of this particular derailleur, as it's not so flashy like the XO. I would say maybe the most shocking weight between all of the group is that the derailleur is only 19 grams heavier, coming in at 489 grams versus the 470 gram XO version. The one-piece aluminum and steel GX cassette still has a 520% range and comes with that updated Eagle transmission cassette mapping with a pin dome design for gears 1 through 8 and a mini cluster for gears 9 through 12. And I forgot to weigh the cassette when it was new, so it comes in at 446 grams with a bit of dirt on it, roughly 65 grams more than the XO version and 101 grams heavier than their lightest XXSL cassette. The new GX transmission cassette does come in lighter than the previous GX Eagle cassette, however. All right, so all of this is tied together with their T-type chain, a specific chain designed for the transmission drivetrain system. The chain and cassette both come with nickel plating, which is said to deliver better durability with a quieter shifting experience. The 124-link GX chain comes in at 22 grams heavier than the XO version at 284 grams. So as I mentioned in my previous first look video, the setup is super easy for the most part. All you need to do is look up the proper setting for your bike on access.sram.com, and this will help you determine the chain length, derailleur setup key, which helps you achieve proper chain gap, and what setup cog you need to use to set up the derailleur properly. The installation is completely different from setting up a traditional derailleur and will undoubtedly be an adjustment, but after doing it a few times, it's pretty straightforward. I added the instruction video below just to get a better understanding of how that works. I found that the tolerance on this Reeb SST dropout was a bit tight, so I had to kind of force the bushing into the dropout somewhat, but once it's in, it shouldn't move anyways, and it never caused me any issue. Overall, the installation was easy, but it certainly is a departure from your typical drivetrain setup, so it might take a bit more time initially. All right, so I tested the XO version for a few weeks this spring, but I definitely have had more time on this GX transmission, over 170 or so miles in the month of June. So while these are not long-term thoughts, I definitely have a good understanding of how this system works, and I couldn't feel any true significant difference between the XO Eagle transmission and the GX. And I think this has a lot to do with the hangerless interface and the setup process, which I genuinely feel makes this system shift so smoothly. I've been super impressed by how the drivetrain shifts through rough and chunky conditions and in the elements. It maintained shifting capabilities through creeks and lots of puddles, only occasionally slipping or getting hung up on the cogs, but I never ended up dropping a chain. And I continue to have really excellent luck, or maybe it's just the way it is, but I've had no issues with SRAM electronic shifting, especially regarding sloppy conditions, creek and river crossings, what have you. So Eagle transmission was designed to shift under load with their new cassette mapping, essentially telling the cassette to move inboard or outboard. Because I ride so many different bikes without Eagle transmission, it's hard to kind of get in a groove of not soft pedaling while I shift. I do this all the time, and I need to remember with Eagle transmission that it's okay to shift with as much power as my normal pedal stroke through the shift process. When I do this, I am super impressed with the sharpness. It's less loud and offers much less hesitation while shifting. One really eye-opening experience I've had since using the pinion gearbox is the not so equal jumps between gears with cassette drivetrains. The way teeth are set up on a cassette, you have no choice in how your gear jump occurs. Like when you go from a 10-tooth cog to the next cog, you have to go to either an 11-tooth cog, which is only a 10% bump, or a 12-tooth cog, which is a 20% bump. There's no such thing as an 11.5-tooth cog for that perfect 15% bump, which the gearbox can offer. So you are limited in gear jumps on the cassette, and the jump can be pretty drastic in some instances. That said, SRAM did improve some of this with an improved step down from the big 52-tooth cog with a 44 and 38-tooth cog versus the 42 and 36-tooth cog found on the previous Eagle cassettes. And I found this useful as I was not searching for, say, a gear in between gears on some steeper climbs or when I was around that range of the cassette. So SRAM mentions that you would likely get shorter run times per battery, but I actually didn't find this to be very true. Run times were similar to the past Eagle Access system, which is counterintuitive as it seems like the derailleur itself might be working harder as it kind of waits for that retimed shift routes on the cassette. My theory is so long as it's set up correctly, it's not putting undue stress on the gearbox. There was a bit more room for error with the limit and bead screws on the SRAM Eagle Access derailleurs. And when those were off, it seemed like, I don't know, the system would kind of work a little bit harder and reduce those battery run times. It is worth mentioning that while you can make micro adjustments on the derailleur inboard or outboard using the app or the controller, I never needed to do so while testing the GX drivetrain. Overall, I got 20 hours with one battery riding mostly single track in Gunnison Harrison and Crested Butte. So a mix of undulating desert terrain and mountain riding. I ended up getting a warning about low battery the other day via my Garmin as I had them connected, and the battery lasted about 4 more hours after that warning, which I was super happy with. So while the XO and GX derailleurs don't come with that neat little magic pulley wheel deal, they are compatible if you upgrade to the XXSL pulley wheel kit. And that is the case with many of these bits and parts on their derailleur and just the system in general. SRAM created removable and replacement small parts to keep your derailleur going for the long run. So talking about the controller a little bit, I never really got used to it while I was testing the XO system, mainly because there's just so many different ways that you can kind of adjust it. So when I installed the GX group, it took me some time to mess around with it, and I ended up positioning it kind of similar to a mechanical shifter, and I'm really happy with that position, and it works really great. I appreciate the separate buttons on this controller and the definitive button feel, or that click when pressing it. I did, however, have one weird situation where the lower button got stuck and it wouldn't shift, but it worked itself out after kind of pressing it a handful of times, and it hasn't returned. So it was a little frustrating, but I'm glad that it went away. After jumping from bike to bike, an Eagle transmission bike, a non-Eagle transmission bike, I definitely find that the transmission offers a more consistent and more durable shifting experience over the long run. It has a more straightforward installation process. You don't have to deal with any limit screws or anything like that. And it certainly makes me feel more comfortable riding with this versus a hanger and derailleur. Sure, I've never ripped the derailleur hanger off my bike, but I know that I'm not going to be ripping this thing off my bike. Is this tech necessary? Well, I'll leave that up to you, but it's definitely pretty exciting. And overall, if you are keen on trying Eagle transmission, the GX version offers everything the XO transmission does at a much more affordable price point, but with a little extra weight. The GX transmission will run you $1,100 USD compared to the XO transmission, $1,600 USD. $500 is a lot of money just for a bit of weight and the same shifting performance. Also, for reference, the GX Eagle Access Group comes in at $915 USD. All right, so what are your thoughts on the brand new GX Eagle transmission? Let me know in the comment section below. These in-depth video reviews definitely do take a lot of time, so if you appreciate them and want to see more, consider joining the Bikepacking Collective. The Bikepacking Collective includes a lot of awesome things, including the twice annual Bikepacking Journal. So for more details, click on the link in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.